Ibrox was absolutely bouncing last night, wasn't it? And the funniest part about all of that was, surely going into that game ahead of Ange Postecoglou's return to the stadium, if you asked most Rangers fans if they would have taken a draw, they probably would have taken it, or even bitten your hand off to taking a point from a Premier League side. That sounds brilliant. But after the game, it's not us that got away with one, but actually Ange, with Philippe Clement setting up his side perfectly in order to exploit all the weaknesses of Postecoglou that have been brought to light during his time in the Premier League, and really, none of us feel any sympathy for him, do we? Moving away from that, however, in today's video we're going to talk about everything Rangers did right, and not what Tottenham did wrong, and how Philippe Clement may have finally turned a corner ahead of the biggest game of the season at the weekend. So be sure to hit the like and subscribe button as we discuss how Philippe Clement and the Ibrox crowd gave Ange Postecoglou the warmest of welcomes back to Scotland. Going into the game and taking a look at Clement's lineup, we actually want to go back to our game from last weekend before we discuss how exactly the Belgian set up his side last night against Tottenham. We've highlighted Clement's problem with selecting his teams and choosing between the first team strikers Dessers, Egerman and Danilo. And against Ross County, he apparently fixed his problem. But how? It's simple, play two up top. Well, sort of, let us explain. Instead of setting up your traditional run-of-the-mill 4-4-2, two up top and lumping it in the box, Clement instead subtly changed Egerman's role, with the striker playing a roaming free role instead of his usual position up top. What this meant was that the forward was free to do what he pleased, dropping deep into midfield, popping up on the wing, just roaming the pitch. As we mentioned, but why? Usually when managers let players do this, it's so defenders have problem tracking the forward, opening up gaps across the pitch as they try and keep tight to the striker. Some of us may have thought that following the success of that tactic over the weekend, the Rangers manager could potentially utilise his strategy against Tottenham and Ange Postecoglou. Well, he didn't, but he still played an important part in the game. Let us explain. Instead of going for the 4-4-2 in possession style as we saw against Ross County, Clement instead opted to go with a 4-3-3 system with Černý and Yilmaz on the flanks. But why was this? Well, we all watched the game last night and we certainly spotted Černý ran Spurs absolutely ragged. By this point we're all aware of how Ange Postecoglou sets up his fullbacks, but for those of you potentially don't know by now, you can see how both the Italian and Spanish fullback are pushed high up the pitch, with Udogie inverting into midfield while Porro operated as a wide fullback, but they both have the same thing in common: they're pushed high up the pitch. And this suited Rangers perfectly. Let us explain. In the first 45 minutes, one thing a lot of you surely picked up was how dangerous, as we mentioned, Vasiljev Černý was in attack. And it's extremely obvious why that is. Since Spurs were pushing both fullbacks high up the pitch, at least in possession, it left gaps for the Rangers wingers, Černý and Yilmaz, to exploit, as we can see here and here. But while that explains how Rangers setting up in the 4-3-3 perfectly countered the way Ange Postecoglou set up his side, it doesn't explain how Egerman playing in the role he did against Ross County at the weekend was important. Well, another part of how Postecoglou set up his side last night that we were able to exploit was the fact that their centre-backs were an experienced 18-year-old and third-string centre-back in Draguzin. But let's focus on the 18-year-old for a moment. We explained earlier how Egerman ran Ross County into the ground by popping up as both the striker and on the wing, and he did the same last night. Taking a look at this moment from the opening 5 minutes as an example, you can see how the Moroccan striker pushes out wide, and while a more experienced centre-back probably wouldn't allow him, Egerman is able to draw Archie Gray out of position, allowing two runners to go unmarked as we can see here. And it's actually this positioning and tactical decision that led to Rangers taking the lead right at the beginning of the second half. Looking at the matchups here, you can see that Yilmaz and Egerman have swapped positions, with the Turk operating as the centre forward and dragging away both centre-backs, while Hamza is able to create a clear mismatch with the Spurs fullback Pedro Porro, who's conceded multiple goals from similar positions for Spurs this season. While that 4-4-2 versus Ross County may have not been in the action in the way we expected it to be, Hamza Egerman's role that he played in that game continued today, and it's becoming increasingly clear that out of all of the striking options, he's the best one. So do you think that the Moroccan should be starting this weekend in what is arguably our biggest game of the season? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Looking back on the game, there was a lot of things Rangers did right, and this was accurately reflected in the game statistics, as the home side dominated when it came to chances created, with 1.28 xG compared to a measly 0.89, As the arguable underdogs of the game, it was undoubtedly a fantastic performance, but let's take a look at what went wrong for a moment. One area where Rangers struggled was when defending and tracking the runner midfielders into the box. As we can see here with this case as an example, while we matched up well individually one-on-one in defensive situations, as Tavernier and Yefty were able to completely nullify the threat of Tottenham's wide options, which is reflected by the captain's statistics on the night. Only being dribbled past on a single occasion, that was never a problem. What Rangers did struggle with though, however, was tracking the run of Spurs midfielders and fullbacks into the box, which are practically the same thing. We can see here, as we mentioned, with Destiny Udogie, and unfortunately, it's also bit us when it came to Tottenham's equalizer. Looking at the build-up to the goal, you can see that Spurs' striker Dominic Solanke drops deep while James Maddison pushes forward. And that our substitute Balogun is caught in between two minds, deciding whether to close down Dusan Kulusevski, who's extremely dangerous in possession, or try to mark out Dominic Solanke. And ultimately, he gets caught out, allowing the English centre-forward to power into the box, and the problem doesn't end here. Skipping ahead to the next frame of the goal, you can see how once again a Rangers defender makes the wrong decision when it comes to closing down a player, as Proper abandons his man in favour of dealing with Solanke. This then in turn allows James Maddison the split second he requires to take the ball out of the path of James Tavernier, redirecting it into the path of one man who started the move in Dusan Kulusevski. And once again, you can see how Clement's men being slow to track down a player, in this case Kulusevski, comes back to bite them. In this one passage of play alone, Spurs were able to break down the Rangers' defence simply by outsmarting them and manipulating their defenders. But is this an issue, especially against Celtic? Well, unfortunately, yes it is, and here's why. Looking back to one of the most embarrassing defeats under Clement, the 3-0 loss at Celtic Park, which I'm sure a lot of us will not want to think about ahead of Sunday, taking a look at the passage of play leading to the opening Celtic goal, you can see how the exact same thing happened against Tottenham once again, with Rabbi Matondo being unable to track the run of Alistair Johnston, who fired in the cross that led to Days and Mader's opener. And after bringing that up, between the Tottenham game and the Old Firm of the past, do we think that this is an actual issue, or is it just simply down to the quality of the opposition that we play? Let me know your opinion on the matter down below in the comments. With all being said, we're feeling good, aren't we? Considering the situation we were in a few weeks ago, behind Aberdeen and trailing miles behind the other lot, with the manager's job looking like it was dangling on a wire, things have turned around nicely, smashing up a few teams in the league, followed up by a fantastic performance last night. And in fact, tonight may have been exactly what Philippe Clement can do with the right players and the right crowd behind him. Even James Tavernier has rolled up his socks in the last few weeks, between the tactical decisions made by the Belgian and the individual brilliance by the likes of Hamza, Václav Černý, Jack Butland, and of course Nico Raskin. Rangers are starting to look like a team again. But it's always good to have some confidence going into a game against Celtic, especially a cup final. So here's the question. Do you think we can pull it off and lift the League Cup? Can Clement outsmart Brendan Rodgers? Do we have the players necessary to beat Celtic? Should Hamza Igamane start the Old Firm, granted he's fit? 4-4-2 or 4-3-3? Let us know your answers down below in the comments. And if you liked today's video, then please do smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for daily Rangers content. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.